Welcome to Section 1 of Creative Collaboration titled Difference. Here we're going to focus on understanding the role of cognitive diversity in creative processes. But first, our primary goal with all of these sections is to provide students with the mindsets and the tools that allow for and foster successful creative collaboration experiences. We're going to do this in three ways. First, we're going to identify the role of cognitive diversity in collaborative coordination. Second, we're going to address the systemic components of collaborative creativity. And finally, we're going to provide tools, skills, and heuristics for operating in this collaborative space. Scott Page defines diversity as differences in how people see, categorize, understand, and go about improving the world. And he breaks this down into three components. First, perspectives, or how we represent the world. Second, heuristics, the tools and the techniques we use for finding our way in the world. Third, interpretations. This is how we create categories about the world and how we interpret how the world operates. So, perspectives can be thought of as the disciplines that we're trained in, right? You get a perspective as an economist, as a psychologist, even in the arts, you might have a perspective as a sculptor or a perspective as a photographer. These perspectives shape how we represent the world, and it also shapes the kinds of questions that we ask about the world. Again, Page defines this as the representations that encode objects, events, or situations so that each gets its own unique name. Now, heuristics are the actionable tools that we use to explore the world. Now, these aren't just tools like statistics that a psychologist might use in answering particular questions, but they're also the mindsets that inform the decisions and the questions that we might ask. We can think of heuristics as rules applied to an existing solution representing a perspective that generates a new, hopefully better solution or a new set of possible solutions. Now, interpretations are based on the perspectives that we just spoke about, but they are predictive assumptions and classifications that inform our decision making. An easy way to think about this is Republicans versus Democrats. They have particular assumptions about how policies affect the public, and they make decisions based on those assumptions that they have about how they're going to affect the public. They both might be politicians, but they approach the problem and they think that the solutions that they come up with will solve a problem in very different ways. So two people can have the same perspective, right? They can both be politicians, but create different categories within that common perspective. A simple example to illustrate this would be going about making a world-class cup of coffee. So you might ask a barista how they would go about making a world-class cup of coffee. And they would give you a couple of assumptions that would go into making a world-class cup of coffee. So if you're to ask a barista, they're going to give you a couple of components that are critical. Do you have good beans? What's the roast? Is it a light roast, a medium roast, a dark roast? What's the extraction method, which is going to affect how fine or how coarse the grind is. So how much water are you using to the grams of coffee ground? And how long are you brewing for? Temperature is going to matter. So all these things are choices that a barista is going to make. And then they're going to make other choices as well, right? They're going to make interpretations about what's a world-class cup of coffee. Is an espresso a world-class cup of coffee? Should you use a Chemex, which would be a pour-over? French press, AeroPress? Is cold brew better? Can you get a world-class cup of coffee just by using drip? All of these components are going to go into how someone makes an interpretation about what a world-class cup of coffee is. A question that's asked regularly is, why is interdisciplinary collaboration so difficult? One of the challenges is how much of our understanding of the world is built through tacit knowledge. That means that oftentimes what we know is not only difficult to communicate, but it's so context dependent that it always changes. One of the most effective ways to transfer this knowledge requires regular interactions. One example of this is architects who seem to almost apprentice through their practice, right? It takes them years to develop this implicit knowledge about how humans operate in the built environment. And so we normally don't think about it in this context, but disciplines have a culture to them. And these norms and modes of behavior affect how they coordinate with others. And when the norms and modes of behavior don't align, it can be challenging for teams to coordinate around a problem. So if we combine these components, right, perspectives, heuristics, interpretations, we create cognitive toolboxes. These toolboxes provide a new way to think about intelligence and ability. What we want to do is coordinate these different toolboxes that we've developed within our disciplines. The best way to get an understanding of these concepts is to run through a little exercise. I'm going to provide you with a voluntary exercise that illustrates how these differences might operate between disciplines. So what I'm going to have you do is you're going to select an object, whether in your studio, at home, in your lab, that holds some value, some meaning for you. And you're going to provide a story about why it matters to you. You're going to write this down, right? After you do that, you're going to select 2 subjects outside your discipline. So if you're an artist, somebody in STEM, and vice versa. And you're going to ask him these 3 questions about the object that you've already written about. So the first thing you notice about that object, what do you think makes this object important? And putting on your disciplinary hat, what is a question you would ask about the object? How would you go about answering that question? The PDF that you can download has more details. I'll express it further for you. That's it for section 1. For section 2, we're going to see that creativity follows a particular process, and you can be more creative by paying attention to the process and understanding where you are in that process.